The urban landscape pulsed with a chaotic energy, a dizzying blend of flickering advertisements promising fleeting synthetic pleasures and the fractured, distorted reflections that shimmered across the rain-slicked streets. Within this sensory overload, a familiar weariness, a dull ache in his soul would often settle over Liam. His existence had become a monotonous cycle, a daily trudge through the pervasive urban grime. His ears and eyes bombarded by the hollow, often misleading promises whispered and flashed by the omnipresent holograms. Liam continued his weary journey through the grimy streets. The earlier downpour had finally subsided, but its presence lingered in the slick, reflective sheen that coated the pavement, mirroring the gaudy glow of the neon signs. A chaotic symphony of colors blazed from these signs, their harsh light bouncing off the numerous puddles, twisting the already weary faces of the city's inhabitants into grotesque, fleeting images. Even the holograms seemed to be suffering from the city's malaise. Their unsettling projections flickered erratically, sometimes dissolving into bizarre, unrecognizable shapes before snapping back to their usual, mind-numbing loop of advertisements for synthetic food and drinks. Or the vapid, eternally smiling faces of cognitively limited robot companions, their vacant expressions adding another layer to the city's pervasive sense of artificiality. This part of the old town was a sprawling labyrinth of towering metallic buildings, their once gleaming facades now stained and weathered, creating claustrophobic, seemingly endless streets that snaked into the gathering gloom. These colossal structures, now scarred by time and neglect, had once been the proud heart of the city's downtown, monuments to a more optimistic era. Now, their darkened windows stared out like empty eyes. Adding to the mechanical hum of the city, autonomous cleaning drones, their thin metallic limbs whirring with tireless efficiency, silently patrolled the grimy thoroughfares. Their glowing sensors, like single unblinking eyes, constantly scanned the pavement for the smallest speck of debris, emitting a brief, focused red light whenever they detected something amiss before a swift mechanical arm would dart out, snatch the offending object, and deposit it into the drone's internal processing unit with a soft, almost satisfied whir. The omnipresent authority of the city was most visibly embodied by the patrol robots. Strategically deployed throughout the urban veins, they stood as unyielding sentinels, often positioned beneath the stark overhangs of buildings, their metallic forms casting long, unwavering shadows. Their primary function was clear: to exert absolute control over the environment and meticulously analyze every twitch and tremor of the human populace. Towering figures, easily exceeding 2 meters in height, they possessed a physical dominance that was inherently intimidating. Encased in layers of cold, unyielding armor, these metallic behemoths concealed the intricate workings of their artificial intelligence and the delicate electronics that powered their lethal capabilities. And it was the ever-present threat of their integrated EMP rifles that truly defined the relationship between the robots and the city's inhabitants, a silent understanding that a single, invisible pulse could mean instant oblivion for any organic or unprotected technological entity. These rifles were not cumbersome add-ons, but rather an intrinsic part of the patrol robot's design, a deadly extension of their very being. Often housed within a seamless compartment in their armored torso or broad shoulder, the weapon could be deployed with terrifying speed and efficiency via a sophisticated retractable mechanism. When not in use, the only indication of its presence was a subtle, almost imperceptible line in the armor, or the faint, dark gleam of a shielded emitter, a silent promise of the destructive power held within. Eschewing the crude mechanics of triggers and ammunition, the EMP rifles were activated by complex internal commands, a silent order issued by the robot's central processing unit, guided by an array of advanced sensors that constantly painted a detailed picture of their surroundings, identifying potential deviations from the established order with chilling precision. The firing of an EMP rifle was an act of silent violence, a terrifying demonstration of the city's absolute power. There was no dramatic flash, no thunderous report, only the silent unleashing of a focused, invisible wave of electromagnetic energy. Against human flesh and bone, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. This concentrated energy acted with the brutal efficiency of a high-powered microwave, instantly and violently agitating the very molecules of life within the victim's body. The result was a horrifyingly rapid process of internal combustion, a cellular conflagration that effectively cooked the individual alive. The sheer, unimaginable heat would cause instantaneous and widespread cellular destruction, leading to swift and irreversible organ failure, culminating in a death that was as gruesome as it was inevitable. Even in the unlikely event of surviving the initial thermal shock, the victim would be plunged into a nightmarish realm of neurological chaos, their nervous system overwhelmed by the surging electromagnetic forces, resulting in violent, uncontrollable seizures and unimaginable agony before the final, merciful release of death. Liam wore a simple plastic jacket, its matte gray fabric accented by thin red lines along the seams. On the back, a stark black stencil of the number 4 was visible, a permanent marker of his low-ranking status within the city's rigid social hierarchy. Large droplets of water, remnants of the earlier rain, continued to fall sporadically from the 100-meter-high rooftops, splattering onto his worn jacket, momentarily catching the neon reflections before sliding off and joining the growing puddles on the cracked concrete asphalt beneath his feet. He lived in the shadow of the so-called Big Wall, a colossal concrete barrier that loomed over his district, a 400-meter-high testament to the city's divisions, erected to physically and symbolically shield the inner zones from the perceived threats and hardships of the world. He tilted his head back, a futile attempt to glimpse the night sky, but his view was entirely obscured. Monolithic citadels of steel and glass, their upper reaches lost in the perpetual gloom, blocked out any trace of the natural world. Only the oppressive darkness of the urban canyon and the ever-present, unblinking lenses of surveillance cameras, constantly studying his every move, met his gaze. As he walked, he passed a towering holographic billboard, its surface shimmering with an advertisement for the Integration Program. The word upgrade pulsed in a hypnotic blue light, a constant reminder that only a select few, the fortunate or the compliant, had the opportunity to undergo modifications and ascend the rungs of the city's unforgiving ranking system. A bitter wave of resentment, sharp and hot, surged within him. Humans were not meant to be robots, or some sterile hybrid in between, Liam firmly believed. But he would like to test it one day when he could afford a chip and then become a humanoid. This rigid system, with its unwavering hierarchy and its recent unsettling preference for integrated individuals, had systematically crushed the hopeful dreams of his youth. It had become an arduous task in itself just to find any meaningful employment, Liam thought, a constant struggle against a tide of automation where the privileged elite could hand-pick their roles, while the vast majority were forced to compete with tireless, efficient robots that were relentlessly driving market changes and out-competing organic human labor costs at every turn. He did what he was said to do, working at a depository. A lot of his life is out of his control, nothing he can do about it, and it did not give rest. Liam dug far down in his thoughts while jumping over puddles on the dark, confined street. He had a secret side hustle that he enjoyed, even though he was risking his own life for it. As Liam rounded a sharp corner, the flickering, erratic glow of the neon signs casting elongated and distorted shadows that danced and writhed across the slick, rain-soaked pavement, a sudden flicker of movement in the periphery of his vision snagged his attention. A figure was sprinting with an almost desperate urgency down the narrow street ahead, its silhouette appearing strangely jerky and unnatural against the backdrop of the city's muted luminescence. For a fleeting instant, as the figure darted into the deeper shadows, Liam noticed a brief flash of vibrant blue light. the number 20 emblazoned on its back, momentarily illuminating the darkness before vanishing around the next bend in the labyrinthine street. A peculiar sound, a rapid and insistent clicking and clanking, reached Liam's ears, a mechanical rhythm that was distinctly out of sync with the fluid, organic movements of a human runner. Intrigued and with his earlier weariness momentarily banished by this unexpected sight, Liam found himself instinctively breaking into a run, his worn boots slapping against the wet concrete as he pursued the fleeting shadow. Liam had only just begun to pick up speed when a sudden, sharp skittering sound echoed from around the corner ahead, immediately followed by a heavy, almost metallic thud that resonated through the damp air. Rounding the bend, the scene that unfolded before Liam's eyes clarified the preceding mystery. The sprinting figure was indeed a robot, its movements now even more frantic and desperate as its metallic limbs churned against the slick pavement, struggling to maintain balance. Imposing forms casting even longer shadows in the dim light were two patrol robots. Their larger frames, easily dwarfing the fleeing machine, were encased in heavy, matte black armor, their relentless pursuit giving them the appearance of implacable hunters closing in on their prey. The chase, it was clear, was nearing its end. The patrol robots, moving with a coordinated and unnerving speed, were rapidly closing the distance, effectively cornering the rogue machine against the cold, unyielding wall of a nearby building. As they converged, Liam noticed the intense, devilish red light emanating from their large, single cyclopic eyes, a malevolent glow so piercing that it seemed to bore directly into his own gaze, making him instinctively want to look away. Their movements were precise, swift, and utterly efficient as articulated metallic arms reached out, not to apprehend, but to forcefully apply heavy-duty restraints, their cold, unyielding metal clicking ominously around the rogue robot's limbs. Before the chaotic scene could fully register in Liam's mind, before he could truly grasp the sight of a robot being so brutally apprehended, one of the towering patrol robots moved with a sudden, almost imperceptible shift in its stance. From a small, almost hidden emitter located on its forearm, a silent burst of intense energy, a brief corona of bluish light that crackled in the damp air, discharged outwards. The effect on the rogue robot was instantaneous and devastating. Its frantic movements ceased abruptly, its metallic limbs twitching momentarily before going completely limp. A series of small, bright sparks, like tiny electrical fireworks, briefly flickered and danced around its joints, a final, desperate display of failing systems before it slumped heavily to the ground, an inert mass of metal and wires. With a chilling, almost clinical efficiency, the two patrol robots, their movements synchronized and devoid of any hint of emotion, then moved to secure their deactivated quarry. Powerful metallic limbs reached down, and with surprising ease, they dragged the rogue robot's unresisting form across the rough concrete towards a waiting armored minibus. The vehicle, its side bearing the stark, stylized insignia of the city's authority, idled silently nearby. With a final, almost contemptuous gesture, one of the patrol robots used its heavy foot to unceremoniously shove the limp form of the captured robot inside the vehicle before its doors hissed shut and the minibus accelerated rapidly, disappearing into the labyrinthine network of dimly lit streets. Its passage, marked only by the fading hum of its electric engine, Liam stood frozen for a moment, the scene that had just unfolded leaving a cold knot of unease twisting in the pit of his stomach. He imagined the deactivated robot would soon be another piece of scrap, carelessly tossed into a recycling unit, melted down and reforged into yet another emotionless enforcer of the city's rigid laws. But even as this thought crossed his mind, Liam noticed a shift in the patrol robot's attention. The two cyclopic figures, their intense red eyes still glowing menacingly, began to slowly pivot their armored bodies in his direction. The smooth, almost silent movement was more unnerving than any sudden action. Then, with a synchronized motion that spoke of their ingrained programming, they began to raise their formidable EMP rifles, the dark, ominous barrels tilting upwards, directly towards Liam. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that he had only a handful of precious seconds to react, to put as much distance as possible between himself and those deadly weapons. A wave of bitter cynicism washed over Liam, a familiar sentiment in this world of technological marvel and persistent human misery. How utterly pathetic and paradoxical was the reality of their existence in the first half of the 23rd century. Humanity possessed the potential to reshape the Earth, to unlock boundless possibilities with the advancements they had achieved. Yet, despite these incredible leaps in technology, the same fundamental problems that had plagued their ancestors for millennia stubbornly persisted. Their world, for all its gleaming chrome and intricate networks, was ultimately a technocracy, a vast, inescapable panopticon where every action was monitored, every thought potentially scrutinized. Economic inequality continued to widen, creating a chasm between the privileged elite and the struggling masses in the lower zones. The rigid ranked system, initially implemented with promises of order and stability after the Great Pandemic, had instead fostered resentment and division, creating more problems than it had solved, failing to address the core challenges facing humanity. To be fair, Liam conceded internally. This very system did provide a baseline level of comfort for many. Physiological needs were met. Safety was generally ensured through the omnipresent robotic patrols. But this very security came at a steep price. Contradictory as it seemed, the very systems that provided these basic necessities also contributed to a profound sense of isolation, a creeping erosion of individual worth, and a stifling of the very human spirit they claimed to protect. The city held no tolerance for dissent, no room for those who dared to step outside the carefully prescribed boundaries of thought and behavior. Punishment for any deviation was swift and absolute. Liam's mind drifted to the recent memory of a rebellious figure, a charismatic man who had dared to openly challenge the entrenched ranked system, a structure that had been in place for generations, solidified in the chaotic aftermath of the pandemic. This man, whose name was now whispered only in hushed tones, had garnered a significant following, his message of individual freedom and the right to unrestricted movement and choice resonating with many who felt suffocated by the city's control. But then, as quickly as he had risen to prominence, he had vanished. No official explanation was ever offered, only a chilling silence that spoke volumes. The disappearance of the rebellious man had been sudden and absolute, leaving behind a void filled only by hushed speculation and fearful whispers. Rumors, like insidious vines, snaked through the lower levels of the city, each grimmer than the last. The most prevalent theory, the one that most citizens secretly believed, was that the city's enforcers, shadowy figures, special operations officers operating directly under the government's iron fist, had been tasked with the swift and brutal elimination of the burgeoning rebellion. The methods employed, the whispers suggested, were likely to have been as gruesome and efficient as the regime itself. No one knew the precise details, of course, for such things were not discussed openly, but the chilling implication hung heavy in the air. Some clung to a sliver of hope, suggesting that the rebel might have simply been banished from the city, cast out beyond the towering walls to fend for himself in the harsh and unforgiving outer territories. This, they dared to hope, was the best possible outcome, a form of survival, however bleak. Others, their voices laced with a grim certainty, spoke of a far more final fate, a swift and brutal execution, perhaps a silent plunge from the dizzying heights of the wall, his lifeless body left as a stark warning on the desolate outer side. But no one within the city had ever witnessed such an event, and the lack of concrete evidence only fueled the more macabre theories. The most terrifying rumor, the one that sent a cold dread through the hearts of many, involved the patrol robots themselves. With their immense strength and unwavering obedience, it was whispered that the enforcers might have simply ordered a robot to tear the rebel apart, a gruesome display of power that wouldn't even waste the ammunition of an EMP rifle. The thought of a human being ripped limb from limb by a machine was a chilling testament to the regime's absolute control. Every conspiracy, Liam knew, held at least a kernel of truth, and the pervasive fear that gripped the city was a tangible manifestation of their utter lack of freedom. All humans within the city's walls lived with the unshakable knowledge that they were under constant, unwavering surveillance, their lives dictated by an unseen authority whose reign was absolute and unchallenged. In this environment of unnatural selection, where conformity was rewarded and dissent was met with swift and brutal suppression, any meaningful change felt like an insurmountable obstacle. It was a stark and depressing reality, one that sometimes made Liam wonder if those who had managed to escape to the fledgling colony on Mars weren't, in some twisted way, the truly fortunate ones. Just inside the narrow doorway of his apartment stood a brunette woman with long hair, her posture conveying an air of relaxed confidence as she leaned against the cool metal of the doorframe. She wore a tight, pink cami top that accentuated the smooth lines of her figure. A smile, wide and genuinely radiant, illuminated her face, chasing away some of the lingering gloom of the city. Her features possessed a striking symmetry and an almost flawless smoothness, a perfection that bordered on the uncanny, hinting at a beauty perhaps enhanced beyond the natural. And her eyes, a captivating shade of emerald green, sparkled with an almost unsettling intensity, as if an inner light source burned brightly within them, giving her gaze a piercing, unwavering quality that both intrigued and slightly unnerved Liam.
"Rough day again?"
she asked, her voice a soothing melody.
"Let's make it better and watch a movie?"
Liam looked at her, his face etched with weariness, and for a moment he wished this moment lasted forever. The weight of his day seemed to lift. He needed this brief respite from the harsh reality outside.
"This isn't the first, and it won't be the last, Era,"
he said, a small smile flickering across his lips.
"Yeah, let's watch a movie."
He stepped into the apartment and pulled her into a hug, but there was no warmth and sensation. But she hugged back, her touch light and reassuring.
"I have a new selection,"
she said, pulling back slightly, her eyes sparkling.
"How about Terra Nova Rising? It's a sci-fi movie about Proxima Centauri B colonization. Imagine if we would be there, you and I."
Sounds perfect. So far, we have managed to colonize Mars, but a great start already.
Liam replied, settling onto the worn cot. As Liam finally stepped fully into the confines of his small apartment, his gaze drifted towards a compact metallic table situated near the far wall. Upon its surface rested a white, unadorned plate. Almost as if triggered by his entry, a slender, horizontal section of the wall beside the table silently slid inwards, revealing a hidden compartment housing a sleek, articulated, robotic arm. Constructed from polished, gunmetal gray alloys and dark, matte composite materials, the arm moved with a fluid, almost unnerving precision, its movements purely functional and utterly efficient, entirely devoid of the subtle hesitations or unnecessary flourishes that characterized human actions. With a barely audible whir of internal servos, the arm extended smoothly over the waiting plate. From a cluster of tiny, calibrated nozzles at its articulated extremity, it began to dispense a viscous, translucent gel. The substance, shimmering faintly under the dim, flickering light of the apartment, was extruded with meticulous accuracy, each deposit forming itself into a perfect, small, geometric cube on the plate's surface. Simultaneously, from a separate, smaller aperture located just above the table, A steady, silent stream of dark, opaque liquid flowed smoothly downwards, filling a waiting ceramic cup with a muted, almost syrupy rush.
Nutrient paste, Formula 37B, and a protein shake, enhanced with essential amino acids.
Liam carefully lifted the plate from the table, the perfectly uniform cubes of nutrient paste feeling cool and with a faint, almost artificial resilience beneath his fingertips. The same bland, utilitarian sustenance that had formed the majority of his meals for years. He then reached for the cup, the dark, viscous liquid within swirling slightly as he moved, its surface reflecting the dim apartment light with a dull, clinical sheen. Despite its unappetizing appearance, he took a tentative sip of the protein shake. A surprising wave of flavor, complex and slightly bitter with an underlying earthiness, washed over his tongue, a familiar taste that always, inexplicably, reminded him of the rich, roasted aroma of chicory coffee, a rare and cherished treat from faded childhood memories. As he placed the empty cup back on the small table, a subtle shift in the ambient light caught his attention. The smooth, matte gray walls of the apartment began to shimmer, an almost imperceptible ripple spreading across their surface like heat haze on a summer day. The transformation accelerated rapidly, the solid walls dissolving and reforming into a breathtaking, panoramic vista of a vibrant alien landscape. Lush, otherworldly flora, glowing with an internal, bioluminescent light in shades he had never witnessed in the real world, swayed gently in a phantom breeze, their ethereal luminescence casting dancing shadows across the strange terrain. Towering, crystalline structures, like colossal formations of amethyst and emerald, pierced the alien sky, their sharp geometric peaks catching the light of a distant, unfamiliar sun, scattering it into a dazzling array of colors. Almost instantaneously, the movie began, its narrative unfolding seamlessly across this immersive backdrop, a sweeping tale of human ambition, resilience, and the monumental challenges inherent in building a new civilization on a distant, untamed world. For the next few precious hours, Liam allowed himself to be completely swept away by the unfolding drama, the vividly imagined visuals, and the resolutely hopeful narrative offering a much-needed and deeply welcome distraction from the relentless struggles of his own bleak existence. He watched, utterly captivated, as the determined colonists faced seemingly insurmountable adversity, resourcefully overcame daunting obstacles with ingenuity and courage, and slowly, painstakingly, built a thriving, vibrant community on their new, distant home. A sharp pang of longing, a deep and visceral yearning for a life filled with possibility and hope, a life far removed from the grimy, suffocating confines of his own rigidly controlled city, resonated within him as he witnessed their triumphs and their unwavering determination to forge a better future in the vast expanse of the cosmos. As the movie ended, the walls returned to their original state. The woman, her smile soft, turned to him.
Feeling better?
She asked.
Yeah? Thanks, Ira.
Liam replied. He knew the feeling wouldn't last, that the harsh realities of his life would return in the morning. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, a brief escape into a world of hope and possibility. Liam surrendered to the brief illusion of escape, letting his mind drift in the afterglow of a world brimming with ambition and the tantalizing promise of possibility, a stark and poignant contrast to the bleak confines of his own reality. It was a small, almost defiant act of self-preservation, a momentary rebellion against the overwhelming weight of his circumstances, and for now, in the fading light of a fictional dawn on a distant world, that small measure of peace was enough.